All right. Good morning, you guys. Still Wednesday, May 13th, 2026, day one of early voting in the Iowa primary election. If you are really on top of things and you can't be swayed anymore, and you want to be removed from text message lists, door knocking lists, phone call lists, your chance is to go vote and get it over with. And you probably won't be bothered nearly as much if you wait until June 2nd. But if you're still trying to make up your mind, then maybe you should hold off on that and uh, give yourself a little bit more time. Right now, we have another Facebook Live conversation with a candidate for Iowa House. This time, it is Russ Saffell. He's running in House District 43. For those of you who don't know, we're going to show you what House District 43 looks like, just so you have an idea on how much this may or may not impact you. Now, what I will say is if you don't live in House District 43, it obviously still impacts you, and you can also still have an impact on this race, whether it's donations, whether it is making phone calls to voters in that district from your own home, or if you have time to go and door knock if you like a candidate in this race, you can do that. House District 43 encompasses what looks to be most of Johnston. Russ, am I missing anything in terms of the geography of this district?
No, so it actually encompasses all of Johnston, so Johnston 1 through Johnston 8. It encompasses Urbandale 2, which is a small sliver of Urbandale that's north of Meredith, but then goes up a few blocks and goes almost to the back side of the Urbandale High School. And then it also encompasses Sailor 1, which is the west side of Second Avenue of Sailor Township, and then also Crocker One, which is uh, now part of Ankeny.
All right. So that's House District 43. If you guys know people that live there, let them know they have a primary. I've said this in a few of these other videos, and I'll say it again. There's 125 legislative seats up, at least, and I think only 20 or 22 or so have Republican primaries in them. So it's unlikely that where you live has a Republican primary in your House or Senate district. But this is your opportunity to really kind of put your thumb on the scales and try and shape, impact the culture of the Republican caucus in Des Moines when they return in January of 2027 for the next General Assembly. Um, Russ, start out. Tell us a little bit about why you decided to run for Iowa House.
Well, so Jacob, I really didn't have any intent on running. I'm just a regular guy, but a few years back, I I've always been very involved in the political process, but a few years back, I was at the Iowa caucus and there was nobody going to run for the seat in my previous district. And so everybody in my caucus site was kind of coming up to me like, "Hey, Russ, would you run? Would you run? We really need a good person to run for this seat." At the time, it was a different district. Uh, Not that I moved, but the district lines moved. And that was the time when Garrett Gobble stood up and he was actually running. And I said, okay, sounds like we've got somebody already running, so I guess I don't need to run. Well, and then Garrett was in that district for a while and he's a good guy, but he kind of had a lackluster performance. And so then I was considering primarying. I had a bunch of people come up to me and say, "Hey, you should primary Garrett and take over that seat." So I was considering that, and I then they redrew the lines, and I ended up having Eddie Andrews as my new rep, and I'm friends with Eddie, and Eddie's a great guy, and he does a fantastic job. So I said, well, I'm not going to primary Eddie. I'm happy with Eddie. But as I got closer and closer to Eddie, I, I told him, I was like, man, you should really consider running for the Senate seat. And I pushed him to run for the Senate seat. And he, he said, okay, well, I'll consider it. And we discussed it, and we kind of came to an agreement that if he were to run for Senate, then I would run for House District 43. In fact, he saved my name in his phone as Future 43. So, Russ, Future 43. And then we met up, a few months later, and I discussed with him. I was like, you know what? The Senate deal kind of bombed. We ended up with Matt Blake, and uh, now, we've got 4 more years for him to run for that. And I said, you know what, Eddie, we found out Kim's not running again for governor. Let's see what you can do to build up your base to run for governor, because you're he's very well liked, and he's very effective. So one day he calls me out of the blue and he said, hey Russ, I took your advice. I think I'm going to run for governor. I said, awesome. Well, I I support you in that. And he said, well, I support you too. I said, oh, I guess that means I'm running for House District 43 then, huh? So that's kind of how that ended up happening. Um, so that's where we're at.
Yeah.
It was kind of a long, kind of weird process, and uh, but it got me here, and I do now feel like I've been called to do this. I've been called to do something for my state. I've been around the world. I've seen things and done things that most people don't get to do. I've got a lot of background that would be highly beneficial to support this position. And I feel it is time for me to get back into the ring, get back to service,
Yep.
and serve my community
Okay.
more than I already do.
All right. So Republicans have had full control of the state of Iowa for 10 years. House, Senate, governorship, Supreme Court. What's one thing they haven't done yet that would be your top priority, or just blows you away that they haven't done anything about it yet?
Well, I think it's not a Republican problem, because Republicans did come together and they did push a bill, but I was very disappointed that the governor um, vetoed the eminent domain. I'm that was very concerning to me. Eminent domain has affected my family directly, and I've seen the I've seen how it can damage property rights. It's not good. And as a person who is very pro freedom, pro individual rights, uh, property rights are at the top of it. We really need to get that eminent domain. Uh, we need to get eminent domain eradicated. It is absolute theft, and it needs to go away. I understand. I've been a consultant for many years in hazard mitigation, and um, I've I've identified all kinds of areas where eminent domain was used to mitigate hazards and things like that. That's about the only reason that you should ever use eminent domain. I don't even agree with it for putting a highway through. I don't agree with it. You should be given the compensation for the property that you own. If you own that property, it's your right to sell it for whatever you think it's worth. And if people don't want to buy it for what you think it's worth, too bad, so sad. Um, if the government wants to put a highway through it, I don't even agree with that. I think now, when it comes to eminent domain for private industry, like the carbon capture pipeline, That's an absolute no-go. That is disgusting. The government should have no say in your property whatsoever, especially in cases where they're going to acquire that property to support a for-profit industry or any private industry.
Yep. Well, is there anything that the Republican trifecta has done in the last 10 years that you think, gee, maybe they shouldn't have done that?
Um, Not really. I think there's a lot of things that have come to question. I know uh there's a lot of division on the ESAs. I you know the jury's still out on how that's going to play out, but I am pro-capitalist. I am pro competition, and competition builds uh builds character, and it also promotes success. It promotes change that usually is for the better.
Yeah.
So hopefully the public schools are able to compete in this market. And I think they are. I've seen great strides in Johnston, in Ankeny. They're doing great things. So I think that this mass exodus that everybody's worried about, where everybody's going to leave and go to private schools, I don't think it's going to happen at the magnitude that people think it is. And I do agree that the money should follow the child. It's the child. It's not public funds. It is funds directly for funding a child. So that those funds should be with the child, and wherever that family determines is the best place for their child to go to school, that should be their decision.
Hey, there's different types of Republicans, obviously. You have establishment Republicans, you have conservative Republicans, populist, constitutional conservatives. Um, where would you kind of put yourself on that spectrum? And just out of curiosity, how do you differentiate between your quote unquote Republican and then like a conservative Republican?
So I am a constitutional conservative with a Christian worldview. So I am the I am not your establishment Republican. However, I do also understand that you have to reach across the aisle to make things happen. If you are waiting to have a supermajority to make things good in your state, then you're doing it wrong. You have to be able to communicate with and influence people of all sides. And that includes people in your own party. There are a lot of people in my own party that we don't agree on certain things, but we agree on most things. But that doesn't mean that we can't communicate on the things that we don't agree on. We need to communicate better. And for me, as a constitutionalist, I am very aligned with our founding principles. Um, I I believe that we have certain inalienable rights that are endowed by our creator, and they are not in question. They should never be infringed upon, and the government has no right to infringe upon any of those.
Yeah. All right, now we'll kind of get into more specific issue-based sort of questions or conversation. I think we can start with elections in general. This has become more and more of an issue, it seems like, within the legislature. Do you think that Iowa legislators should be required to live in the district that they actually represent for more than just the 60 days prior to the general election?
100%. They should have to live there. I would be in favor of them having to have lived there for a period of time before they even run for that office. I I personally hate the fact that somebody would even consider running for a seat in a district they don't even live and don't know anything about.
Yeah.
Um, I when I knock on doors, I say, "Hey Russ, hey, I'm Russ. I'm your neighbor." Like, how do you say that when you don't even live anywhere near that person, you know? And obviously, people in Johnston 8 might not be my direct neighbor. They're still part of my community. You
Right.
know, they're still my community. They're still people that have a shared interest and have that it's the same stuff applies to everybody in my whole district.
Yep.
So if you're running um, in another district, and especially one where you cover a lot of rural Iowa, uh, and then you're trying to cover a district that's suburban or urban, um, that's going to be obviously a different demographic, and you may not, you don't have any relationship with those people other than the fact that you're both Iowans.
Right.
And yes, I assume that this is kind of a question about the Busalo and Enos race, and I I support Wes's statements that Mike be should live in that district. I like Mike Busalo. He's a great guy, but he shouldn't be running for that district.
You have a state in Iowa where voter ID is required, and we have a lot of safeguards in place for election integrity that other states, blue states, don't.
Yeah.
Um, is there anything that you could think of we should do beyond what we already do to strengthen our election integrity? And really, I mean, just to me, soapbox moment. Today, early voting starts. I kind of think if you want to vote early, whatever, at least show up in person. I'm not as comfortable with the idea of mail-in ballots. If I don't even know that I could show up at my polling place, take my ballot home, do whatever I want to do with it, let whoever touch it, and then return to my polling place and just put it in the machine. I don't know if that's allowed. So a mail-in ballot, I mean, that's a lot of things can happen with those. Um, would you favor kind of restricting that maybe to students who are out of state for college, military people, people in nursing homes, or what do you think? I mean, is everything hunky dory the way it is?
So I'll be honest with you. The only time I ever voted absentee ballot was when I was in Iraq. So, and I do support our troops being able to get absentee ballots overseas if they're deployed or even if they're, in CONUS, but they're, not living in our state, but are still registered as voters in our state. Because when you're in the military, your home record stays your home record. So yes, I would support that for the military. And that is a lot more tracked. Like nobody's going to be messing with your ballot generally when you're in the military. How, however, I do worry about uh, situations like nursing homes. You have there's got to be a better way. All of those people deserve to vote, but perhaps there's some other system we could use that validates that they are the person who's actually voting. Sending sending these ballots to nursing homes scares me because you've got a nurse that may be an activist that steals all the ballots and forges some signatures and sends them all back in, and nobody's the wiser. These people may not even know that a ballot was sent to them. So I think that we really need to kind of rein that in. I I am not really in support of much other than military and students who are overseas or out of state
Okay.
being able to vote remotely. But I think that we should have some sort of perhaps mobile voting station or something that could be brought to a nursing home.
Yeah. You look at spending in Iowa, we spend more than $1 billion than we take in right now. We're able to do that because of reserve funds that have been built up, but obviously those are only as good as long as they're around, and they're not going to be
Yeah.
around forever, especially at this rate. So, what should the state do or be prepared to do for when those reserve funds are no longer here? Because if we have more than $1 billion in deficit spending, either spending has to be cut significantly or revenues have to go up, which means the government has to find a way to collect more money. So what's the answer here?
So, first off, as an economist, I support zero-based budgeting, and I do not support spending beyond your means. If you or I were, you know, $1 billion in debt and tried to go get a loan, do you think they'd give it to us? No, they wouldn't. Why is our government able to spend beyond their means? Um, and I know that that's a Democrat and Republican thing. They have both overspent, and it's it's nonpartisan, and everybody should be for fiscal responsibility. I don't care what political affiliation you have. If you're not for fiscal responsibility, you're just crazy. Everybody should be a good steward of the people's money. And I think that we need to stop looking at public funds as guarantees, and we need to start remembering that it is the people's money, and we need to be those good stewards. So I would like to look at, I know that Doge has become a bad word, but ultimately the look that the original intent is good. I am for process improvement. I have that's I've been hired to do tons of process improvement cases for large entities, businesses, government agencies. And when you get down to what are the essential functions of government, I think we will find that we are doing way more in our state government than is than we could consider as our essential functions.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we slash government across the board. There needs to be, we need to hit this with a scalpel, and we need to really identify what those essential functions are, what the requirements are to operate those essential functions at the uh, most efficient level without without digging it too much into their optimization. We need to make sure that they are optimized for success, but streamlined. We need to cut out redundancies. That we did that. That was great. We cut down 37 agencies to 16. That was a huge step in the right direction because we already had tons of redundancies baked into our state government. I think that there's a lot more that can be done. And look, my mom's a retired state employee. I I have no intention of slashing state government where it doesn't need to be slashed. But if you're a state employee and you're sitting at your desk twiddling your thumbs and you're like, what am I doing here? You might want to look for another job because it's honestly there's a lot of those positions out there that are like that. And we do a lot of we do have a lot of agencies that are almost solely grant funded. I know the
Mhm.
Iowa Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management is like 80% of their staff are grant writers. So they're just seeking grants. There's a lot of grant funded agencies out there that probably some of that should be state funded if we want to have buy-in. But we need to seek out these grants, and we need to also look at building our commerce. We need to invest in Iowans. We need to invest in our awesome ingenuity, our intelligence. Iowa has some of the smartest people in the world. and we need to invest in those people, entrepreneurship, small business. We need to build the small business base. We need to build that competition up. We're the insurance capital of the world. Why can't we be the capital of every other industry? We're one of the largest ag industries in the whole world. We need to boost our national and international trade, especially on ag products. We need to keep keep the push on biofuels. It's a great commodity, and we need to encourage people to come here and to stay here. We have so many people that graduate from college, they get, and then they leave
Yeah.
because there's nothing here for them.
Yep.
So if you go to Iowa State University and you graduate with a uh, you go all the way through your PhD in nuclear physics, you're not staying here because there's nothing for you. Now, maybe if we rebuilt Dwayne Arnold, there might be something for you, but we really need to start focusing on creating the jobs, which is to support these entrepreneurial endeavors,
Yeah.
support small businesses, help them grow so that we can create those positions for the people who are graduating from college, who are learning new trade skills, who need a place to work, and give them the opportunity to stay here so that we can maintain high wages and low costs of living.
Yeah. So we're going to pivot to education. It's another area we spend a lot of money on. Um,
The
is it
most,
underfunded?
the most
Yeah.
money.
Is it underfunded?
I don't believe it is underfunded. I do believe that the funding should go through some strict scrutiny. I think that we really need to look at how we spend those dollars.
Yeah.
Too much money is going into administration, and less money is going into actual curriculum development, materials.
Yeah.
I I am sickened by the fact that I know we fought to raise teachers.
Okay. Yeah.
Republicans fought to raise teachers' wages to a minimum of 50,000 a year. However, I mean, 50,000 a year right now is relatively low. Um, but I also know teachers who are creating crowdfunding pages to buy school supplies for their students, or they're buying it all out of pocket because the school isn't funding, paper and pencils and construction paper and whatever they need to do their classes. And there are schools with books that are older than dirt, and they don't even have current curriculum in them. So we really need to focus on that. And we need curriculum development to go back to the common sense, not
And
common
that's going to
core,
be what,
common sense.
that's one of the questions I was going to ask you is the legislature in recent years has really taken aim at DEI funding programs, offices, critical race theory, all those things. Um,
That's
would you
disgusting.
support going further in those efforts
Hell no. I mean, there's no
and
better way to
reining
put
it
that.
in?
Oh, yes. Reining it
Yeah.
in? Yes. Yes. Reining it in? Yes. Um, DEI is the most divisive, racist, discriminatory policy that you could ever have. I mean, it is discrimination policy. You are basically codifying discrimination,
Yeah.
making it the law of the land to discriminate against people.
Yeah.
That's that's the opposite of what we are wanting. We are wanting a blind society. We
Yeah.
want we want opportunities for all kids, all adults, prosperity for all. It doesn't matter what your race, creed, color, religion, background, your orientation, doesn't matter. All Iowans deserve prosperity.
You already said you support money following the family or the student, so the
Yes.
ESA program is fine. Um, if we pivot just a little bit to public libraries away from public schools, there are many public libraries in the state, the vast majority, that offer sexually explicit materials, content to be checked out by anybody with a library card. So the
You know,
youngest kid with a library card has full access to this. Do you think that the state should go ahead and step in and say, hey, if parents want to give their kids access to this stuff, parents do whatever, but the government probably shouldn't be peddling sexually explicit content to kids.
the government has no place in anything having anything to do with sexually explicit material. Um, they if people want to purchase it, go to Amazon, you know. If they want their kids to have it, buy it elsewhere. Buy it from private industry. Do not expect it to be at a library that is paid for with public funds. Plain and simple, anything that is sexually explicit should not be in a library in the first place. Now, I will say this. If they already have it and it's going to stay there, everybody that's my age or older has been to a Blockbuster Video and seen the adult area. That there's no reason why it can't be an adult section only and that area be monitored. If
Right.
if that's how it's going to have to be, then it I got I got ID'd. I'm 46 years old and I got ID'd for buying a video game like 5 years ago. So it said because it was an NC-17 video game and they have to ID everybody at Walmart. So I'm like, okay, well, yeah,
Yeah.
here's my ID.
Yeah.
Um, it's it's not unreasonable, but I will say that public funds should never be spent for anything explicit.
All right. The life issue, abortion. Obviously, Iowa has the fetal heartbeat law. When do you believe life begins, and should Iowa go even further in protecting unborn children?
I believe that life begins at conception. I believe that all life deserves protection. I believe that our founders believed so strongly that the protection of life was the most important thing that they listed it first in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I agree wholeheartedly with the heartbeat bill. Um, it could go further, but I'm also a realist. I know that it's unlikely that it would go any further. It's one of the strongest pieces of legislation on this matter in the whole country, and I I don't think that there's enough concessions on the other side to allow it to go much further. And I even within our party, there's a lot of division on this particular um, question, and I know that you've got a ton of people who are, you know, okay, abortion is evil, but in cases of rape and incest, or, you know, in this other situation where this happened, so it's going to have to be it's like I don't know, it's a individual situation because each individual situation is going to be different. Um, and I I agree that we need to protect all life, but whether or not legislation is going to happen on that, I highly doubt it.
Yeah.
Not
Uh,
that I wouldn't vote for it, but I just don't think that it would even see the light of day.
yep. You've already mentioned you're against eminent domain for private
Very
gain,
much.
CO2 pipeline, so we don't have to talk about that. But when you look at rural Iowa, which isn't a ton of your district at all, Um,
Just the
what do
very
you,
end of my street. It's
yeah,
it's all cornfields.
what do you think, in terms of wind turbines? Those have been big issues for people in different parts of the state, as well as data centers, just with the amount of energy and water that those use. Um,
I
what's your
am not
position on those?
I am not for tax abatement for any private industry. Um, Even if it is perceived to be for the public good. I do understand that data centers are going to be the wave of the future. That's where all of our stuff's going to be stored. And I do, having a counterterrorism background, do not want them to be in a foreign nation housing my data or any American's data. However, they take up a lot of space. They cost a ton in energy that is also being spread across us as additional consumers of that energy. They also take a ton of water, and the water they use currently through aquifers is drinking water. So we
Yeah,
need to make sure that um, we aren't tapping so much into our precious resources of energy and water to house data. Like this is a big building that's filled with servers and very few employees. Um, they're not bringing in the employees. So why are we giving them the tax abatement? Number one, if they brought in 100,000 jobs to Iowa, maybe some sort of tax abatement. But no, if you're not bringing the jobs and you're taking up precious space and precious resources, they should be paying us a premium. They should be paying the state a premium. Um, as far as wind turbines go, uh, I worked in the energy security and critical infrastructure um, industry, and they almost nobody I know in any municipality or in the energy sector believes that the wind turbines are a good idea. I I have family that are repairmen on wind turbines, and I have a cousin that actually is an instructor for teaching people how to repair wind turbines. I don't want to take his job. I don't want to take their jobs. But I'm going to tell you right now, I'm definitely not going to, because the repair costs on these things and the maintenance and the build and everything costs more than the actual energy that they produce. So if they are producing less value in energy than it costs them to run, is it a good investment? And if there weren't uh, tax incentives,
right.
and if there wasn't subsidies giving them, I mean, giving Mid-American these things, Mid-American would be like, yeah, we wouldn't put these up because, and now that those subsidies are gone, I don't see any more of these things going up. In fact, the if you go out by Greenfield, out over between Greenfield and Stewart, over by White Pole Road, right off the interstate, there's a huge field full of debris, broken down wind turbines that they can't do anything with. They can't grind them up because if they grind them up, the dust gets into the environment, and a human can't breathe that. Neither can any animal. It could it and you can't really bury it. It's it's just a bunch of old crappy debris that how is that good for the environment? You
Yeah.
know, when these
Yep.
things when these things break, what do we do with them? Nothing.
You look at um, immigration has been a big topic of conversation forever, it feels like.
Yeah.
Would you support making E-Verify mandatory for Iowa employers?
Honestly, I thought it already was. I mean, I've never worked at a place where I didn't have to fill out an I-9 and go through the E-Verify process. I've I used to be a federal investigator where I conducted background investigations on individuals with classified positions, and I've never even heard of people being able to get a job where they didn't have to go through a verification of identity process. And in I-9, you fill out that I-9, it's a Homeland Security form, and you have to show your passport, your driver's license, you got to show your birth certificate. You've got, and that I've hired people for very low level positions where I still had to do that. So yes, I'm 100% in favor of it being mandatory. I don't understand how the city of Des Moines hired a guy that,
Hmm.
I mean,
The
that's
school
the
district,
whole,
the
the
Des Moines
school
Public
district,
Schools,
the
yeah.
Des Moines Public Schools. I just can't fathom how that even happened. I mean, I definitely wouldn't have happened under my watch. I can promise you that. So,
What do you think? We're gonna get close to wrapping this up here. We've seen in Des Moines Republican members of the legislature, particularly in the Senate, stand up against leadership and force a vote on eminent domain, for example, in order to proceed with the budget. That didn't happen this year, happened last year.
yeah.
Um, can you think of a time that you've kind of stood up to leadership or something you would stand up to leadership over and kind of go against the grain, against the caucus if you had to? What would something have to be like to trigger that from you?
Anything that threatens individual liberty, anything at all. I I am very pro the government staying out of everybody's lives. Um, if if there is any inkling that there's going to be some sort of intrusion into people's lives, or any at the same time, like I know on the property taxes, if there's ever any pushback on property taxes, I'm going to stand up hard and fight for that. Um, Eminent domain, I would stand up hard and fight for that. Um, Property taxes in Iowa, some of the highest in the country. Property taxes, not just on homes, but your vehicle tags every year. It's ridiculous. Think about this: you pay your property tax. My mom bought her house in Urbandale in 1973 for $29,900, and she was taxed on that $29,900 at the time of purchase. And then every year, I mean, her house is paid off, been paid off many times now, but uh, you the amount that she has paid in property taxes over the years because of falsely inflated assessments conducted by the same people who are taking your money from you. She's paid more than the $29,900, many times more over the years for the same house. And it's unrealized gains. You're taxing people on unrealized gains. Her house isn't worth that. It isn't worth what they're saying it's worth. Her house is worth whatever she chooses to sell it for. And that's my stance on that. The same problem goes with our vehicle taxes. I buy a vehicle. I buy a $50,000 vehicle. I pay taxes on that $50,000. And then, 2 years down the road, I sell that vehicle for $45,000 to my neighbor. My neighbor pays taxes on the $45,000 that he just bought my vehicle for on a product that was already paid taxes on. Now,
Hmm.
granted, do you think that the new car industry would lose their minds if we cut that? Absolutely. They would absolutely lose their minds. The manufacturers would hate it because nobody'd buy a new car. Everybody'd buy a 1-year-old car because they wouldn't have to pay taxes on it. However, is there's got to be some sort of reprieve. It becomes ridiculous over the amount of time a vehicle is on the road. We are paying more for that car than that car was ever worth. And the same goes for our taxes on our homes. My property tax note went up $90,000 in 1 year. How is that possible? The marketplace doesn't say it's possible. And another thing that I would fight for is people coming in to our state from out of state, buying up all of our real estate properties, and then flipping them to become Airbnbs or rental properties, and then falsely inflating their value. Again, falsely inflating the market, pricing people out of the marketplace for places to live.
Yeah.
I know people who are trying to they were looking for a home to buy, and now there's no way possible that they could look for a home to buy because they're priced way out of the marketplace. So they're looking at rentals. Well, guess what? Rentals are more expensive than buying a home right now. The same house that you could buy for $300,000, you rent that house out, it's $3,000 a month. And the renter wants you to pay 3 times that you have to make 3 times the amount of the rent. So you have to make $9,000 a month to rent that house. Plus, you've got to pay all the utilities, everything on top of that. Now, if you made 3 times the amount if you made $9,000 a month, why wouldn't you just go get a mortgage on a house and pay a quarter of that, half of that? You only need to make twice the amount to get a mortgage. But it's these kind of tactics that are really messing with the marketplace in Iowa for housing. And we need to rein that in. If the legislature needs to step in and make some rules so that people in Iowa are not getting screwed and our properties are not being basically stolen, and we have a housing problem. And we aren't fixing it by letting these people in here buying up our property. And the same goes for ag property. I absolutely hate anybody from out of our state and especially out of our country coming in here and buying up all of our ag land. And I'm glad we've done something about that. But I think there's more to do.
You look at, well, I guess we can probably wrap it up. But what would you say is the first bill you would plan to introduce or sponsor as a member of the House of Representatives?
Kill eminent domain, 100%.
Okay. All
Kill
right.
eminent domain.
Well, that was pretty simple.
Yeah,
Again, if people want to help, this is House District 43. Do I still have
yep,
that right in my memory? That's pretty good for
yep.
me. Um, People can help. Again, 125 seats up in the legislature for reelection, only like 2022 primaries. So if they want to help, if they say or if you said something that resonates with them and they want to help your campaign and they don't live in the district, I'm sure they can still do so via a donation, via coming and helping you knock doors, making phone calls from their own house. I mean, there's all kinds of ways they can help. I guess kind of tell people what you're looking for if you're looking for help, how they can find more information about your campaign, and one thing they should remember about your candidacy here.
One thing you should remember is I work for you. I'm a real person, and you want to get a hold of me, you call me. Call me on my cell. I'll 329, well, 515-329-4319. You can call me. You want to reach out to me, Russ at Saffell, S as in Sam, A F F as in Frank, ELL, or for you military type, Sierra Alpha Foxtrot, Foxtrot, Echo, Lima, Lima, the number 4, Iowa.com. Kind of looks like this. There you go. I had a sign sitting next to me. So there you go. If I want to hear what matters to you, I want to hear what matters to you, and I want to be your voice in the legislature. I am not an empty suit. I will stand up for what is right and I will fight. I will be the wall that they beat against to get things done. If I have to be the wall to block bad things from happening and the hammer to make good things happen, I will be that for you. So please feel free to reach out to me. I work for you. On my website again is Saffell4Iowa.com.
Yep, and we shared that in the comments section of the video. So if you want, the link should be right there. And I should say, I should have said this at the beginning. There are two other people running for this seat. Both were invited to come on for a debate. Neither responded to multiple inquiries when I reached out. So everybody had their chance to state their case. And Russ Saffell was the one who responded and chose to come on to answer the questions. So, Russ, I appreciate your time. Good luck. We'll see what happens.
All right. Thanks, Jacob.